Hi, I'm Rachel Abbasi. Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. As always, thanks for spending time with me.
Hello, happy day. So I have to tell you that this morning someone asked me for the link to my podcast. And if you're listening to this very episode, I'm like, what if I say it's so funny when I do this every day and anybody in the world can find it. But when somebody I know asked me for the link, I'm like, oh, they're gonna discover that I think I get imposter syndrome. So anyway, welcome if you're listening, and welcome to all the new subscribers. We've had quite a few new subscribers lately, so welcome. I'm glad you're here. I hope you get as much out of it as I do. Today, what I wanted to talk about is a few things that came up in my meeting this morning, but also a story that I had heard a couple weeks ago or a month ago. I'm not sure. But the topic is both we have to give it away to keep it. So, what that means is being able to be, and this is what stood out in my meeting this morning, being well enough to help other people, to be able to be available for other people, but also to be able to share our experience in order to hopefully spread that hope to someone else, to believe that if they can do it, I can do it too. And that's why I do the podcast, and that's why it came up this morning in my meeting. I don't typically talk about my podcast because I feel like I think it's because I came from a marketing background and I don't want to ever come across as like I'm trying to sell something. I'm trying to sell my podcast. I really show up here every day, almost every day, every day except for weekends and holidays. Now I used to show up every day um, to share my experience, strength, and hope, to try to help another person. I spent the first half of my life, what I'm hoping ends up being the first half of my life, surviving, just trying to survive. And now that I'm sober, none of my problems changed, but some of them just disappeared because the problem, and I didn't see it back then, was my drinking. It wasn't actually the external circumstances that I was in. When I look back now, I'm like, yeah, everything was really beautiful around me. Everything was going well around me, but inside of me, I was screaming. I was screaming. And once in a while, when nobody was around, that actually came out of my mouth. I remember sitting in my office one day and I had, don't ever do this, and I'm ashamed to say it, I had stopped taking my anxiety medication on my own because I thought, oh, well, I'm not with my ex-husband anymore. Like that was the problem, that, the situation that I was in was the problem. But it wasn't the problem. I was the problem. And I remember just turning my chair around and yelling out, I can't take it anymore, because the chaos in my mind had consumed me. I couldn't think anymore. I couldn't think straight anymore. Um, So I knew at that point I needed to go back on my medication. But I know lots of people do that, but I'm getting off of the topic. So once I stopped drinking and started working the program and started practicing the steps, the problems, I could handle them. It's like, so one of the promises of the sobriety program is that we will be able to handle things that used to baffle us. And that's exactly what happens. And it's almost it's almost, my mind just went like, it's almost difficult to see the change happening within us until we spot check and look back and be like, I wouldn't have been able to deal with that. What I heard this morning is, instead of having that mindset of I can't handle this, that changes to how can I solve this? How can I help not just myself, but how can I help other people? Um, so going from 24 hours a day drinking. That was my experience. 24/7, I was drinking. If I was awake, I was drinking. Either I was reaching over under my bed, or I was reaching under my driver's seat of my car, or I was reaching into a boot in my closet. Like, there was alcohol everywhere so that I could continue to maintain this level of absence in my life. So going from that self-focused mindset to entering into the program, so I was in like self-preservation before I stopped drinking. And then I get into the program, and then it becomes similar self-focused, but what I'm trying to do is learn how to live. Like, so I have to be focused on myself. I'm trying to learn how to live without escaping. And man, that's hard when you're used to spending, again, the first half of my life trying to get away. I was never adapting to any changes in my life. I was escaping. I was escaping from fear and uncertainty and grief. Man, was I escaping from grief. I had a young man in my life pass away the summer between college graduation and my first year in college, and I never grieved. I never grieved his death properly until I got sober. And I remember specifically going through the stages of grief when I got sober about him, that young 20 some year old. Was he even 20? Yeah, 20 some year old. I was grieving him, that 20 some year old, when I was in my 40s. And that's crazy. It's crazy that I didn't know how to face fear, uncertainty, and grief. But healing reaches this new level when I learn how to face it. And then when I learn how to face it, I learn how to help others face theirs. I can start listening to someone else. I could not even handle my own life, much less try to be able to help somebody else's. But now it's like I can offer hope instead of constantly searching outside of myself for joy and hope. And I have it inside of me at all times. I truly believe that. Now I stopped saying now I'm searching for joy. I'm searching for happiness because it's already inside of me. I just need to practice the principles of my program and all of my affairs, and it surfaces that joy and that hope. So this idea that we need to give it away to keep it is like one of the greatest paradoxes of recovery. the more that I give, the more that I receive. That's why I'm here right now, because I know instinctively now that if I record a podcast today, that my recovery is gonna be stronger, period. The more that I reach out and I share my experience, strength, and hope, the more I help, the stronger my own recovery becomes. And I mentioned that in my meeting this morning, and it's almost like when it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, oh, you mentioned your podcast again, because it just feels like a commercial whenever I mention it. But I think everybody knows that that's not what my intention is. Um, our experience, I say this a lot, our experience was never meant to be stored away in the back of our own minds. It was meant to be shared. There is so much value in us connecting with each other, sharing our experience so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to figure out on my own how to grieve, because I get to talk to other people about it. This entire fellowship of thousands of people, um, I can listen to their experience, strength, and hope, and I can learn from that. I don't have to figure it out on my own anymore. So a month ago or so, I heard this story of the corn farmer. So I wanted to share that story because it seemed to resonate with me on this topic. So there was a farmer who grew excellent quality corn, and every year he won the award for the best um, grown corn in his area. So one year, a newspaper reporter interviewed him and learned something interesting about how he grew his corn. So the reporter discovered that the farmer shared his seed corn with his neighbors. So the reporter asked, how can you afford to share your best seed corn with your neighbors when you know they're entering in the competition with yours each year? So the farmer said, why, sir, didn't you know that the wind picks up pollen from the ripened corn and swirls it from field to field? If my neighbor's corn grows inferior, cross pollination will steadily degrade the quality of my corn. If I'm to grow good corn, I must help my neighbors grow good corn. So it is with our lives as well. So those who want to live meaningfully and well must help enrich the lives of others. For the value of a life is measured by the lives it touches. And those who choose to be happy must help others find happiness, for the welfare of each is bound up with the welfare of all. So I really love that story. The good corn depends on the good corn around it. So recovery works in the same way. The people around me influence my environment. And when I help others grow, we all benefit. My well-being is connected to the well-being of those around me. And I mean that um, in person and virtually. I am the same person behind my computer screen as I am if I'm standing in a room with people. And that is really important to me because I see so often, I'm thinking of one person in particular at the moment, but that we something that I wouldn't say to someone's face, I'm not going to say it on social media as well. If I'm not going to stand in a room full of people that I love, that I have a relationship with, and say something on whatever topic, I'm not going to say it online either. I love the idea that a meaningful life is measured by the lives that it touches. Um, I need to be careful with advice. You know, people don't need advice. They need understanding. And there have been moments when someone was struggling and I discovered that my own experience, if I shared that with them, it allowed me to connect with them in ways that I could not if I'm just trying to give advice, because I don't have the answer necessarily. I don't have their answer. I don't have their solution. And it's not like I'm wiser than them. And if I'm trying to give advice, that's what I feel like, that I'm coming across as being wiser than them. And it can be offensive, but what I can share about is my pain. And my pain has taught me the language of compassion and empathy that I never would have otherwise. It goes to step 12, which is our step in the sobriety program about this very topic, about giving it away to keep it, about being able to sit with other people and talk to them without trying to fix them, sharing our experience, strength, and hope. So, what I heard this morning is going from this mindset in early sobriety from I can't handle this to how are we going to solve this? I mean, that's a huge transformation. I remember before sobriety, the panic attacks, catastrophizing, feeling so overwhelmed that I couldn't breathe. I was shaking all the time. I heard someone else mention being in crisis all the time. And I, it was killing me. It was affecting me in ways that I would have never admitted. Well, that I didn't really believe. I was so used to living in that constant state of panic that I couldn't possibly see the physical um, implications that were happening to my body. I mean, I wasn't eating. I what I didn't know is how I was affecting my organs, and that became clear as I towards the end of my drinking started going to doctors a little more, started mentioning some of the truths about my problem. It started to become revealed to me, I guess, that there was a problem, a deeper problem within me that was never going to solve the problems outside of me. After I got into sobriety, it wasn't immediate because, well, my anxiety medication wasn't working when I was drinking. So I needed to go through this period, probably a couple months. I was going to say a month, but it was probably several months where that anxiety medication really started working. And I started to be able to see clearly my own experiences became clear, the reality of what was going on with me. And I started to be able to see this doesn't have to own me. This problem doesn't have to control me. I can assess. I don't have to react by my impulses I can actually pause. I can ask for help. I can work on solutions with other people. And my sobriety taught me how to respond to life differently. Um, After my stroke, there were times when I questioned whether I would be able to, like, how can I live a meaningful life now? How can I be of service to others? How can I help when I can barely even use my eyeballs, when I'm in constant pain? I was so focused on what I lost, and I couldn't possibly see that I had anything to give. And isn't that the same as sobriety? I I was so broken. There's no way I could see how I could possibly help another person. But as we survive, living this in this rather than in a survival mode, but living, if that makes any sense, living instead of surviving, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It reveals something really surprising, that my value does not become limited in relation relative to my value doesn't become limited relative to my disability. My value doesn't become limited relative to my disease. My greatest contribution is being able to share my experience and have that empathy, have that presence and that encouragement, um, to be able to say, I understand, you're not alone. You're not going through this. We're going through this. So service in stroke recovery also pulled me out of isolation. Being able to start recording this podcast and talk about, like, again, if you go back to my very first episode, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I just hit record. You can hear my dogs barking in the background. Um, and I didn't, I knew what I wanted to be doing. I wanted my pain to help other people. I thought, I can't go through this terrible situation where I had to lose my job. I have a disability. I can't see anymore the way that I used to. Um, Being in chronic pain, I can't go through this alone, number one. And I can't have it. I knew I was going to survive. I knew I was going to get through it. I didn't know how. So whatever I was about to learn in stroke recovery, I know well enough now after going through sobriety that I don't want to be the only one who learns it. So I need to record it, you know? Um, Being able to start talking about it out loud, knowing that somebody is listening. I don't see your faces, but I'm thinking of your faces. It reminds me of my purpose again, that I can strengthen my own recovery through gratitude. Um, Sharing my experiences reinforces the lessons that I learned from them. And every time I share my strength, I don't know that I'm sharing my strength until it already comes out of my mouth and I hit stop record and I'm like, okay, that I shared my strength. At the time I was sharing my experience, but when I stop recording, I can look back and be like, that was strength. That was strength that I just shared about. And And in turn, that is hope. And when I can share my hope, I'm spreading hope. Um, and I can remember that I have hope. So if that makes sense. So there was a time when my recovery, both in sobriety and stroke recovery, was simply about saving my own life. Um, I didn't know that that was going to turn into usefulness. I didn't know back then. I didn't see the miracles that were happening in my life. And I didn't know that I was going to have this valuable stuff to share, to pass on. Um, until I started talking about it, until I started opening my mouth. And I learned that in step 5. As simple as that sounds, the very first time I sat in my first sponsor's living room, and I started talking about my pain, I started talking about my experience, and I heard her say, "Oh, I did that too. That happened to me too." I was flabbergasted. And I don't use that, I don't use that word lightly. I've never used that word. But I was flabbergasted that this person who was sitting there listening to me could relate to me. But that's exactly how I learned how to be of service to others. Um, because I know what that felt like. I know what it felt like to have somebody say, "Yeah, me too." And so that is today how I want others to feel. I mean, I've dedicated my life to that, to helping others know that feeling that they're not alone, that you don't have to isolate anymore, and we can grow together. So that's it. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time.